Hey, welcome back to another video. In a previous video, I made this mallet, which is a recreation of this wagon wheel mallet. This one is from my great-grandfather, and we think he made the head out of an old broken wagon wheel. So I want to make a nice plaque holder for this thing to go up on my tool wall, and that's what I've done with gathering up materials here. I've got some brass that we can make a little sign on it. I'm gonna put some brass in the corners. I've got a piece of walnut we need to clean up, and I found this piece of ambrosia maple that I think we can glue together to make the panel where this will sit. So let's get to it. All right, we've got our maple pieces ready to glue up. I'm going to get a little glue on this to have this panel starting to set, and then I'm going to start working on breaking down some walnut that we're going to use for the frame. So let's glue it. Nothing like gluing your clamps to the workpiece here. Just testing the fit right here to just kind of eyeball it and see from a design standpoint if this is too chunky for the outside frame. I think it's a hair thick still. I'm gonna end up putting some pins, probably brass pins in the side, kind of like this mallet. And so by the time I pin them over, they'll be about 3/8 inch kind of in the corners. And I think I need to go just a little bit thinner on this. So I've just kind of been using relative measurements, and I'm going to keep doing that. And now I'm going to go to the miter saw and cut my frame pieces to length. I really need each of these frame pieces to extend the thickness of the frame material past my base piece. So for each cut, length and width, I'm going to add 2 pieces of my material length, and that way I don't have to measure. Now I'm just going to set up my stop block, and to get it dialed in just right, I'm gonna put the blade down, and I'm gonna get this piece, my material, and butt it up against the blade. Then I've got 2 little offcuts of my frame material, and I'm going to put those in between my stop block, and that's gonna tell me exactly the length of those 2 long pieces. Now I am back at my table saw. I've got the crosscut sled, so I am just going to use my workpiece here, then those 2 spacers here. Now I'm just going to use these tin snips, metal shears, and cut a little piece of this brass out. This is just sheet brass, and it's quite thin. I'm gonna clean it with some denatured alcohol, and then we're gonna spray some marking spray on it. All right, so I was doing some tests to make sure I could get this dialed in, and I'm glad I did. It is a little bit long, and what I forgot to do was account for the blade kerf. So I'm off by about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to kind of remeasure and get this correct. Okay, so really all I need to do is get the width of one of my pieces, line it up here, and I'm gonna strike a line here on the other side. That way we don't really have to measure. We're just using the thickness of our piece, and it's nice and flush. Just line this line up here with my zero clearance on my table saw sled and get a stop block ready so that we can get that repeatable. And here's why you do referential measurements. That is the exact height. All right, I've got all the pieces cut now, and I'm getting some good fit here, and it's pretty exciting because everything's all dialed in. It took a little while to do some tests, but boy, is it worth it to do some test pieces because you get some really nice fitting pieces. I'm just doing a quick dry fit here, and it's looking like everything is lining up quite nicely. I'm gonna check square real quick. All right, I am ready to glue this thing up. I've got my band clamp ready. It's already all set. I've done a dry fit. Everything looked like it fit together well. I went ahead and sanded the insides here because I won't be able to get to them very easily later. And I'm just gonna be very careful not to get much glue squeeze out on there because that means more cleanup later. So I'm gonna get to gluing this up, and then we can move on to doing the brass in the corners. I've got my brass piece here that I just got out of the laser, and it's looking pretty good. I'm curious to see what it's gonna finish like. I'm gonna use some rubbing alcohol to wipe the dry moly off of here, and it should leave the engraving everywhere that the laser hit. But it is rubbing off all of the inscription. Not cool. Guess I'm starting over. Well, let's try this again. I took this upstairs, put it in the glow forge, etched it out again after doing the treatment again with the same marking spray, and hopefully this won't just wash it all off. There we go. I must have just not etched it deep enough last time, because now this stuff is wiping off and it's remaining where I lasered it. The box I drew around here is just to help me sand to that line so that I can get an exact rectangle that is lined up with my design. That turned out really good. I'm ready to get these brass pins in here. I've drilled them out, I've cut the brass pins, and I've put a small chamfer on the edge of it, so as I'm hammering these into the piece, it's not wanting to grab the edge with that burr. I'm just gonna use some 5-minute epoxy and put these in there, then I'm gonna peen these over with the ball peen hammer. Now I'm just going to mark where I want the brass post to be. Now that both of these have kind of tacked up, the surface is kind of tacky after about 15 minutes, I can place this hopefully in the right spot because of my markings and then press it down, but you got to get it right because whenever you put it down here, it is done. And the contact cement adheres to itself. So on both of the surfaces, it grabs to itself. And now I'm just going to use some Starbond CA glue to set them in here. They're a really tight fit, so I don't want to be cleaning up a bunch of epoxy if it inevitably gets everywhere. I'm going to use a little dab of this down in the hole and hit it with some activator, and that should be good enough. Yeah, I use this Starbond CA glue a lot. I really like it with the activator. This that I was using is the thick, so it can do a little bit of gap filling. And yeah, I like it a lot. I'll have a link below to this stuff where I've got a discount code. If you use Bruce A. Ulrich at checkout, you can save 10%. But I'll have links below to all the stuff that I used in this video, so definitely check those out. For the finish on this one, I'm using Odie's oil. It's a real simple one. You just take some white Scotch-Brite pad, or you could really just wipe it in with a towel. Just kind of buff it into the surface, wipe off any excess, let it sit for 30 or 40 minutes is what their instructions say. And then you come back and just buff off any excess, and you're good to go. I'm going to use my plunge router to use a keyhole bit, plunge in there, make a quick keyhole, and then hang it on the wall. That is a wrap on this project. I really like the way this museum style plaque turned out. I limited myself a little bit on the brass accents because I didn't want it to be too much, but I think it's a nice kind of pop of color. This was my great-grandfather's mallet, and we call it the wagon wheel mallet because we think that he made it out of an old wagon wheel that broke and he put a handle on it. So I just wanted to commemorate him, and I get to see this all the time in my shop. Thanks so much for coming along and watching this. If you feel like I earned it, give me a thumbs up. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. That way you get notified next time I upload something. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.